Here we are, we made it through another year. It certainly has been interesting. Yeah, we'll go with that. That's the preferred diplomatic terminology to describe this stretch of time. Before I disappear into the darkness below a cozy blanket to gorge myself on festive treats as 2025 fades away and 2026 shoves its unwelcome way in here, let's cap things off with something nice so that the last taste in our mouths wasn't No Man's Sky. Not that No Man's Sky was bad, but it was kind of like plain toast. There's nothing wrong with plain toast, I could enjoy that perfectly well, it's just it could have had a lot more going on. We started this year on something of a sour note with the game Project Tower, a really unimpressive sci-fi game with like one good idea that was barely given the space to breathe, made by people who seem to have mistook passion for talent. Sure, today's subject is a game from over a year ago, but by now you should be used to the fact that I'm well behind the times. Besides, looking over the recent releases and seeing a barrage of games with AI slop cover images makes me want to walk into traffic, so better to pick up a game that at least makes me smile. The Plucky Squire was shown to me by one of my closest friends when he stayed with me a couple of months ago, and I was immediately smitten with the game. Everything from the adorable art style to the simple yet satisfying gameplay to the incredibly charming and often very funny writing just got me. If you saw my last review of No Man's Sky, you'll know that I debated between making November the Plucky month or the Space month, and in the end I decided I'd rather save a game that I know I'm going to love for the last review of the year. Doing things this way, I'd have something to look forward to, and given my general aversion to all things Christmas, it would be nice to have a reason to get excited this month. So I welcome you, my friends, enemies, and all plucky entities to another review. I'm Ronica, this is my channel, and today we're diving into an utterly charming game that always left me with the biggest smile on my big stupid face. That's right, Plucky Squire, it's your turn for hugs and kisses because holy fuck, you absolutely deserve them. We'll have a read of the story, we'll have some fun with the gameplay, and ultimately get to the point of why I think it's such a good game and everyone should play it. Remember to do the like video thing if you enjoy this video thing, well done me. Leave a comment if you'd so wish, and subscribe for future content. I do reviews and game runs here, so if that's your cup of tea, then I hope you'll stay a while. This will be, like I said, the final review of the year, but don't worry, I'll be back to curse your feed in January. For now though, let's dive into the land of mojo and follow the tale of the Plucky Squire. The Plucky Squire has that feeling of being lots of little games in one, drawing inspiration from classic Zelda titles and Mario games with its top-down perspective and platforming sequences, also Punch-Out of all things. I'm not cross with that by any means, I'm just surprised that we'd find a tribute to it in the Plucky Squire, and to have one that feels so fluid and responsive, like real effort was put into this one-off minigame. I love that. Let's quickly do our control rundown. This time I've actually drawn the back of the controller to show stuff like triggers, you know, only a year late, but hey, we got there in the end. The left stick, as you probably already guessed, is for your standard movement, which feels very tight, smooth and responsive. The right stick is... actually, it doesn't really do anything. The game's camera is always fixed, so our buddy is kind of out of a job here. Poor little guy. At least it is for now, there are big things afoot. The X button is your usual jump command, and like the general movement, it feels very tight and reliable. If you press circle, you'll do a little dodge roll, which is adorable and great for, well, dodging things. Welcome to dodging. Pressing square will swing your sword in a basic free attack combo, but thanks to the right combination of sound and visual effects, I found it to be a very satisfying action. Pressing triangle on certain objects like blocks lets you carry them, and if you press it again whilst carrying something and whilst running, you'll throw it a fair distance, which might take some getting used to. The amount of times I tried to put something down but forgot to stop moving first, so I watched my character yeet it across the room, yeah, it's something. On the plus side, you can't lose any puzzle elements you might need, they'll always be there in the level for you. You can't accidentally throw them out of reach, or at the very least I never found a way to do so. I had to go and find a different way to soft lock myself. I know, what kind of game doesn't appreciate the fact that I want to fuck over my own progress? Throughout the game you can unlock new abilities using these, light bulbs. Okay then, to buy new combat moves from this cat who cosplays as a shop. Okay then, I will admit that confuses me slightly. You see, I thought by collecting the light bulbs we just passively unlock skills after we've got enough of them because hey, we're gathering light bulbs, or ideas as they're typically represented in media. But no, we pay them to a cat to buy stuff. I guess just light bulbs are currency in this world. Fair enough. Anyway, yeah, we take these to the cat shop and we can buy new skills, like this sword throw ability. By pressing R2, you'll launch your sword forward and it'll damage any enemy it connects with, and then at the end of the throw, it will return to you, unless it got caught in a wall or a tree or a rock or something. Ah, but don't fret, pressing R2 again will recall the sword immediately, and if you do wander too far away, the sword will get lonely and come right back on its own. It'll generally launch in the direction that you're facing and moving, but it also kind of tracks enemies to a point, so it's quite useful. Then you have the spin slash pulled off by pressing L2, it spins spins and slashes, that's what it does. And then there's the jump attack, which is square and X. It should be noted that these additional attacks deal less direct damage to enemies, but their functions sort of outweigh this, and to be completely honest, they're just fun to play with. Being able to do different attacks makes the combat more enjoyable, and I suppose late game they do become a bit more useful, but keep in mind you'll never use your sword on a boss. Pretty much every boss encounter is a different, unique minigame. The sword is entirely for dealing with basic enemies, but like I said a minute ago, I find them fun, so I'm quite happy to advocate for them. During a combat sequence, if you take some damage, then you'll see it displayed by this little heart. You'll also note that you only have 6 total hit points to work with. There's no way to increase this maximum throughout the game, but plenty of enemies and bushes in the environment will cough up a heart or two if you need a restore. The small ones heal for about 1 HP and the big ones for about 3. There are some sections where enemies are a one-hit kill, but we'll leave those for now because they kind of link to a different mechanic. So it's nothing special mechanically speaking, but it's definitely not a bad setup, although it sure would be cool if there was somehow some fundamental shift to how this 2D top-down side-scroller game looks, feels and works. Oh yeah, there is! It comes in the form of the ability to leap out of your book to explore the real world. For you see, the Plucky Squire himself is contained within a storybook, but sometimes through the power of meta magic, our hero will need to leave the confines of the page to find useful items in the real world. Once you've left a page by finding one of these green portal thingies, and holding triangle to actually, move through it, you're free to explore the desk where the book is set, and certain moments throughout the games have levels almost entirely set in these 3D spaces. This is a really cool concept, and the shift from 2D to 3D works really well. Since it doesn't actually change how you play the game, it just puts you in a space with a Y-axis, so the usual setup of this page is top-down, now this page is side-scroller, is swapped for a larger, seamless level, which doesn't even fully abandon the storybook aesthetic, because you can find doodles around the place that you can jump in and out of to go back into 2D space. And some of these kind of throw you with their perspective and arrangement. I feel like I should quickly point out the fact that the game is only age-rated at 10+, and everything about it from the mechanics to the style screams that this is a game for younger audiences. But when I say the game doesn't waste this 2D 3D idea and really gives it all the room in the world to breathe, I don't mean for a kids game, I mean it without qualification. It is all so high effort. The Plucky Squire is that sort of media that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Sure, there are some themes and lines that might go over a kid's head, but it's like with the animated family films having the odd joke or line for the parent who got stuck taking the ungrateful sperm to the cinema. The Plucky Squire tries its best to offer a little something to everyone, both narratively speaking and gameplay-wise. The levels and world-jumping mechanics, yes, they're all intentionally simplified to be accessible to a younger audience or to more casual players, but I don't think that makes them bad by any stretch of the imagination. I won't lie to you, the longest I was ever stuck on a puzzle was like 5 minutes, but that was entirely down to my own incompetence, not because the puzzle was hard. I just missed a very blatant element and I feel quite silly. But yeah, I suspect you won't exactly be left scratching your head unless you're aggressively stupid. The Plucky Squire is at heart a very simple game, but it knows how to make things feel satisfying. It's never more complicated than it needs to be, and manages to make really good use of its world-jumping mechanics, plus its moment-to-moment combat and puzzle sequences are all very enjoyable. Largely, it achieves this through an expert use of visual cues and sound effects. The jolly tune that plays when you complete a task, the flashes and grunts that accompany a blow to an enemy, the bopping back-in tracks that punctuate every waking instant. The game really understands the importance of good audio-visual design. One of my favourite puzzle mechanics is how we can take sentences from the book and change certain words within it to alter the state of the world around us. It's awesome, it's such a cool idea and it's very well realised, plus it sort of stops being a thing before it outstays its welcome. If the Plucky Squire knows anything, it's how to make sure that its mechanics and challenges don't become stale through overexposure. This mechanic really suits the storybook setting, it's well implemented, and I like how abruptly the world pops from one state to another based on the text. I could see this being potentially jarring, but I also just kinda like how instant it is because it shows the power that the words on the pages truly hold. It's a good feature is my point. It makes sense, it's put together well, and it doesn't become stale through excessive overuse. The Plucky Squire generally understands what should and shouldn't be core mechanics, and when to use what it has to better serve what it's trying to do. Even when looking at things the game does a lot, like say the combat, which is a core element so comes up all the time, it manages to stay fun, both through being very straightforward and because, again, the little audio-visual touches make it so engaging. The way time slows for a second when you hit an enemy, showing you that your attack connected and giving you a hefty whack sound effect, which I think looks and sounds really cool. How enemies will be thrown backwards as the camera shakes with every strike. For as simple as it is, it's pretty darn satisfying, and I think said simplicity is a point in its favour. There's no reason to bloat it with extra features or mechanics. That said, enemies do get knocked back weirdly far when you swing your sword at them, so it's not too hard to send them out of range of the rest of your attacks, so maybe this could have been a bit less prominent. It is, in my mind, the one thing that risks making the combat feel more like a drag, but that's really the biggest flaw that the combat has. It's such a minor complaint late that I almost didn't mention it. Back on the literature manipulation for a second, not every sentence you see can be changed, but you can figure out which one can be by hitting it with your sword and seeing if a word pops loose. As this is done in the style of a children's book, the sentences aren't overly long or frequent, so you won't have to spend ages plugging away at long soliloquies just to advance. But what I really appreciate about it is the same thing I appreciate with basically anything. It's the little details, the small things that could be so easily overlooked but show just how much care the devs had. That's what makes it wonderful. Let me use this moment as an example. I saw a sentence that read, "A huge bug sat in the middle of the path." I then saw the word tiny being used in a different sentence on the same page describing a frog. So immediately I knew what I needed to do. I needed to make the bug tiny to get past, but more importantly, I knew what I wanted to do. You see, I can also remove the word huge from that sentence and place it into a different sentence. You can see where we're going with this. Before taking the word tiny to the first sentence to progress the game, I made sure to replace it with the word huge in the frog's descriptive sentence and made it really big. There was absolutely no advantage to doing this, nothing to be gained except the appreciation of a large frog and the level of effort that's been put into this game. The devs didn't have to do that, but they did, and I absolutely love that. This 2D storybook setting is done so well in every aspect. Everything from the simple yet endlessly entertaining art style, which has that cutesy, uncluttered look where everything is still teeming with character, to the way you manipulate the book itself to influence the inner world. You can find special gauntlets later on in the game that let you tilt the book's pages to move heavier objects back and forth. It's not quite as smooth as you'd think it would be, it's not really physics-based, but you know, it's still a cool thing to do. I will admit though, saying that out loud, I do kind of think I would prefer it if it was physics-based, so we had to get the tilt of the book just right, but then again, I can see how that could be more annoying to people who might not be into video games as much, but then again, it's just physics, and I feel like people understand physics even if you don't understand physics. Like, you're not going to be a scientist, you're not going to be like writing physics papers, but you kind of understand that if a heavy thing is on one side of something, then the thing is more likely to fall to that side because the heavy thing is on it, or at least you figured that out very quickly. I'm getting really off track here. I need to just let's press forwards. Press onwards even, not forwards. It's the wrong thing. I guess it kind of means the same thing. Anyway, right, okay, sorry. Focus. Later on, you'll unlock these special stamps, which you can apply to objects on the pages to alter how they work. One of them freezes things in place, which is very useful. What do you think the other one does? Just like, take a guess what you think the other one does, because I wouldn't have guessed this. Yeah, it puts a bomb on the page, which deals damage to enemies and can send objects flying. For some reason, that's a thing you can do in the Plucky Squire. I'm not mad about that. I'm very much on board with this. I wouldn't have seen that coming. These stamps are both great. They're an absolutely fantastic element. I do think the stop objects in place one isn't used as cleverly as it could be, but to be fully honest with you, I think I'm just mad that a solution that I came up with didn't work because I thought I was being really clever. Basically, what happened was, earlier in the game, I say earlier in the game, about midway through the game sort of, you're on the beach, you have to cross the ocean, but you can't swim. So I thought, oh, I've got the time stop power, and someone said we have to freeze the ocean in place to walk on it. Now I thought, freeze the ocean in time, and then walk on top of the frozen ocean because now we won't sink beneath it. I thought I was being really clever, and even when I stamped the ocean on the page, it glowed a little bit like it was affected by it. That didn't work. No, I had to do the sentence thing of swapping actual words, and like, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that being the solution, but I thought I was being clever, and the game didn't reward me. I expect a letter of apology on one of my desks before Monday. Anyway, I should probably get back on script because I kind of drifted a while ago. You deploy your stamps with L2 and swap between which one is active with left or right on the D-pad. These do only work if you're currently standing on top of one of the pages, but of course that's the only time they actually need to work, so that's perfectly fine. These are all genuinely great ideas. They play with the idea of the storybook so nicely, and they add an extra dimension to the later puzzles. Also, just plopping bombs down on top of these dudes in their tanks and listening to them panic, that was way funnier than it needed to be. Oh cool, I feel like more of a psychopath than usual. As for the 3D real world, it's also really well crafted. It uses height and verticality in a way that simply doesn't translate quite as well in a 2D setting. Though I have to say, this is where the game starts to show a few cracks. For one, the game feels a little less stable in the 3D space. Now, to the Plucky Squire's credit, it never crashed or broke itself during one of these sequences. It just kind of had a frame rate jitter when it was doing the wider establishing shots, and for some reason my spin attack out here just doesn't work. Except where it does. That's odd. I don't don't like things being inconsistent like that. Sometimes it just won't fire off, other times it would, and I could not tell you how the game decided which way it was going to go at any given moment. The 3D areas is also where the game introduces a couple of forced stealth sections. I know that sentence was a complete mess, but I typed it that way, so we're just gonna go with it. Again, to offer credit where credit is due, these aren't dreadful. I play Little Nightmares a lot, so being small and sneaking around things that want to eat me is kind of second nature at this point, but they would definitely be a part of the game that I wouldn't try very hard to save if I heard they were getting patched out tomorrow. The first enemies that we need to outsneak are these large bugs. Well, they're not large bugs, they're regular sized bugs, we're just very tiny. They already feel a bit awkward to work around because of how they twitch and dash around the place like a real insect might, but I feel the main issue is that there's not really a clear indicator of their line of sight or field of awareness. There's also no build up to them getting aggroed, they see you and immediately jump at you. I think partly this is a problem with the forced perspective, we can't really move the camera to get a better understanding of whether or not they can probably see us, but of course I've got to put my hands up here and admit that it's definitely also a skill issue on my part. I still don't care for these moments though. Even later on when you're avoiding the much more predictable soldiers, it's not great, and I feel like I need to stress they're not necessarily terrible sections. They definitely work, and once you do get a feel for them, they're absolutely fine, but that's kind of the problem. They're just fine, and fine not even in a particularly good way, just fine in a this is a forced video game stealth section. Like, narratively, I get why we have these moments in the game, they just feel like they really don't belong in the Plucky Squire, and I know the game agrees with me because later on you get a different kind of forced stealth section which is actually well designed and fun. Look, I like stealth in video games, just either as a core feature upon which the entire game is built, or as an optional one that I can completely ignore if I have an assault rifle or mini nuke handy. I can't stand it when a game forces me to slow down and wait because it can really hurt the pacing of the rest of the adventure. At least these sequences are over fast, and again, they make sense in the situation that they occur in, I'll give them that much, but they really do feel out of place, like the devs didn't fully know how to make one of these sequences work until later when they did. Towards the end of the game, we take control of Pip the mouse as we dodge past guards to help our friends evade capture. This was also a stealth section, but it was fun and much better presented. Firstly, it was 2D and grid based where the lines of sight were always made clear, but there was this funky beat to proceedings which made the whole thing feel so much better to play, and Pip's funny little stance definitely helped. These sections were great and they upped the ante as they went along, they were genuine delights. The big issue with the 3D stealthy bits is that they lose that visual flair, that plucky energy that perforates the rest of the game just doesn't translate to these sections very well at all. Pip's top-down in-book stealth moments had this rhythm to them that made even sitting idle for a second entertaining. They were bursting with charm and charisma that these real-world bits simply can't maintain. This is somewhat symptomatic of the real-world section's biggest issue, and that's thus. The game might be an eclectic sack of minigames that's always trying to do something different a few times per chapter, but the 3D spaces generally lack this same philosophy. They're just 3D video game, which admittedly is fine, they've got even some nice wallpaper. The thing is though, all of the interesting ideas and minigames, they're in the 2D spaces, the 3D ones just feel really underutilized. It's not that I don't like hopping out of the book and taking in this new world before me, appreciating the level layout and all the little details like the scratches on the desk, the open paints, all the little crafting supplies that are just everywhere. There's so much detail in these 3D spaces and that's so great, but barring a single moment where you get a jetpack, oh yeah, at some point you get a jetpack in the Plucky Squire because that's just the kind of game we're playing. This whole realm feels like it's sorely missing what makes the adventure on the pages so great. Let me make one thing clear, these moments, they are not bad by any metric, they still have a lot to offer. The level designs are a good mix of 3D and 2D elements, the visuals are still fantastic, I adore the arts and craft supplies that are scattered around the desk and how these levels feel like they were made with whatever was to hand. They have that very Little Big Planet quality to them. These aren't bad sections, they're just, you know, kind of not as good as the other bits. I will say that things definitely pick up when the final boss rears its head, but I don't really want to spoil that section. Just know that it's a really fun sequence, so at the very least the real world bits get to go out with a bang, they finish strong. I should probably mention that the 3D jetpack sequences that I alluded to before were also quite fun, though I don't love how it removes your basic jump and replaces it entirely with the jetpack. I know we still get huge height from the thing, so that's great, I just personally prefer to jump and then go into the jetpack burst. This is entirely a me thing though, it's a personal preference, it's not actually a point against the game. The overall sequence is well designed and lets you make full use of the limited flight. I don't know why I said limited flight with a cadence of bitchiness because I really like this bit. Oh that's right, I'm British and can't fully experience joy, I knew there was something. It's worth saying that the game's engine doesn't really do physics works all too well, so if you jump from a height and then try to use the jetpack to slow your descent, it doesn't quite work that way, but then again, fall damage isn't really a thing, so it's not like it has to work that way. Again, no, it's just a preference of mine, it's not a real problem. I can appreciate these sequences for what they are. For all their follies, the outside world sections are fun to play around with and just exist in. Again, I'm a Little Big Planet fan, so this approach of the level is made of toys and craft materials really appeals to me, and it all makes perfect sense within the context of the game. The book that we come from sits upon a desk in a child's room. This desk is messy, chaotic, clearly the property of an artistic child, and honestly, it feels very authentic. I was an artistic child, well, kind of both. But this bedroom, despite the fact that I never had one that looked like it, still felt weirdly familiar, and again, the little details are what really sold it. I think it's because it was clearly made by people who also had a huge artistic drive, so they'd know what this sort of thing looks like. The desk is messy, there are paints and art supplies scattered all over the place in a way that probably makes sense in the mind of the kid that did it, but to an outsider it just looks like chaos. There are blemishes from wear and tear, little scratches and nicks in the wood. This is not a room designed to falsely sell the illusion of an artist by just having a few paints and brushes present. It's a room that feels so genuine. Real art supplies are rarely kept as clean as you might expect because, hey, they're kind of being used a lot. I still think these real world bits are the weakest sections of the entire game, but the thing is, the worst part of the Plucky Squire is still a part of the Plucky Squire and still carries the inherent appeal of the game, and let's be real, the game succeeds way more than it missteps. It's kind of like how the worst part of the pizza is the crust, but that doesn't mean it's a bad part of the pizza, it's just relative to the rest of it, it's not as good, but it's still great. I still love eating pizza crusts. Like I said before though, the 2D sections are where most of the best bits of the game can be found. Whilst the basic combat kind of remains the same throughout, the game's approach to boss fights sees it implement new mechanics and setups to keep itself feeling fresh and interesting. As is the way of the Plucky Squire, they're all kept intentionally simple, but I'd argue that they're presented and programmed so well that they're fun regardless of this, and in some cases because they don't overcomplicate themselves unnecessarily. At one stage, one of our party members by name of Thrash, who is a mountain troll and looks like this, I like him, he's a cool little guy, needs to defeat a giant bird in battle. This battle takes the form of a rhythm game where you deflect pots that the bird throws at you, shake snakes off yourself that the bird also throws at you for some reason. I guess the bird knows of his ophidiophobia. Or maybe it's just weirdly effective to throw danger noodles at people in battle because, hey, it's still an angry bag of throat, I'm still not gonna love it, and I don't even have a phobia of snakes. But anyway, we then reflect a giant metal lug nut back at the bird's head to finish it off, and you know what? Fair enough, why shouldn't we have this section? This section is amazing and I absolutely love it. Later on, our friend Violet has to do a sort of bubble style colour matching game with a Tetris twist where the bubbles get closer and closer, dealing damage if they get too close to you as you pop them. Also there's bombs because this is the Plucky Squire and you just shouldn't ask questions. Now I know what you're thinking, but Ronica, is there a moment in the game where we play a side-scrolling shooter? Yes, of course there is. This is the Plucky Squire. That exists in this game for some reason, and it's great. It's fun, it's responsive, it's satisfying. Every minigame encounter we have is fantastic. Even the simple grab the fish one is just a fun little thing we can do. They're all really well programmed and they have the right visual and sound effects to make them entertaining. I never got bored playing the Plucky Squire. This game was always working hard to be a delight, and whilst I appreciate the real world segments, they're just not the bits I'm gonna remember in the long run. And I know that for a fact because between recording sessions I completely forgot that they existed, because all of the most interesting things about the game are either found on the pages of the book or they come about because of how we manipulate the book, which yeah, that's a 3D thing technically, but it affects the 2D world a lot more directly. That said, the 2D spaces aren't fully free of issue. I wouldn't be doing my nope, can't say job with a straight face, try it a different way. I wouldn't be the pedantic YouTube arsehole that you all tolerate to varying degrees if I didn't highlight some of the flaws that appear even in these sections. For example, very early on you'll come across these pages which are prone to bugging out in a very specific way. Basically what happens is that you'll walk onto the page and find that after all the dialogue is done, you're stuck facing in a single direction. You can still move in all the other directions, but you're always facing forwards unless you grab the art scroll, then you're suddenly facing a different direction, but you can't change the direction. But that's not even the main problem of this particular bug. When it happens, we can't proceed to the next level. The level link is inactive, it doesn't exist. I had this occur on all 4 of the playthroughs I did of this game. Luckily, quitting to the menu solves the problem, but it's still worth addressing because, let's be honest with ourselves, this is not acceptable to find in a finished product. It's very early into the game and it can completely derail what you're doing, since you have to go back to the start menu to get it working. It's never great to find a bug like this in a game, especially when the game has been out for like a year. In one minigame where you have an axe and are fighting dinosaurs because this is the Plucky Squire and no idea is too wacky, there's a climbable object. It's the only one in the game like it, and that's good because it's really janky. You have to jump off it before you reach the top, otherwise you'll just jitter back and forth until you eventually fall off, and it's very awkward feeling. Also in this section, there's a big T-Rex looking dino that's a one-hit kill towards us, despite us being armed and more than capable of fighting back, and also the other dinosaurs aren't one-hit kills because fuck me, I guess. It's the only big enemy in a 2D section that we're not only completely unable to harm, but it can also kill us without issue, so just leg it. I'm not really a fan of it, honestly. It feels inconsistent in a very detrimental way. Sure, the 3D stealth sections also had the one-hit kill rule, but it makes some sense because we don't have our weapon in those sections, so rather than pretend we can escape our fuck-up, the game has the decency to just kill us like an adult. Still, this dino section is like 1 minute long, so it's not really a huge problem. I just think it's kind of a dick move. The game also uses the old Life Force door design, you know, where the enemies in the room are the entire reason that the door is staying shut, because for some reason that is how doors work, and them dying opens it because that's also apparently how doors work. Yeah, I never did vibe with this design choice, to be honest. It's always struck me as incredibly lazy and arbitrary, though it does lead to a humorous gag later in the game, and I guess for a game aimed at younger minds, it makes more sense to just open the door when you're finished murdering. I know, right? How dare this game for children not justify a simple mechanic to a burned out 30-year-old who's been gaming for most of their life? I demand another written apology on my desk before Schler's Day or something. I will say though, I love the fact that these doors in question have like little faces on them. That's adorable. My point is though, the game isn't flawless. It has a few technical issues and some design missteps that are a bit of a shame to see. I will say that there is some work that still needs to be done here, but I don't think any one of these was a deal breaker. Well, no, I know for a fact that none of them were a deal breaker because I played the game multiple times already. It's a ridiculously good game. The amount of time the humorous writing led to me cracking a big stupid smile and laughing out loud, the way the 2D combat flows so nicely, and how all the puzzles are clearly simple enough to be accessible but still kind of delightful to solve. The game oozes with charm. It seeps from every page of the book within which the adventure begins and ends. The Plucky Squire works so well because it's constantly asking itself, what else can I do? What can I add to this section of the game to make it stand out so that all-important feeling of adventure and fun is upheld? It's not an overly long game. I think if you stretch it, you get about 8 hours of content per run, but that's not a bad thing at all. If you know me by now, you know that I prefer a shorter, more well-crafted experience over 100 hours of aimlessly slogging about. The game manages to keep its pace quite well. It's a very linear title with a few crevices to find stuff in, but in terms of progression, we're always moving forwards. Something else you probably know about me is that I don't think that linearity in game progression or storytelling is necessarily a bad thing, because when used well, it keeps a game feeling tight and focused. Sure, it does mean that on a replay you won't be as surprised, but that's a whole discussion about replayability which I've already had in a previous video. I fully cannot remember which one. The Plucky Squire is a short and very strange game, but there is rarely a dull moment. It does a lot of different things and generally does them quite well. The moment-to-moment gameplay is generally engaging, the mini-games are great. Both the music and art style fit this game to a T. One detail I really liked, small as it is that when you take an item from the real world or a different piece of media, like say this elven longbow, because yeah, you get one of those at one point, by the looks of things you pick it up from some sort of Magic the Gathering card. The object doesn't conform to the Plucky Squire's art style, it maintains its own look because yeah, these things aren't a part of that world by default. They haven't been illustrated in the book, so why would they look like they had been? This is a rare case of achieving artistic cohesion even with conflicting elements. I definitely had more harsh words to say about the game than I hoped for going into writing the script, and that really is a shame, and of course that bug that I mentioned where you physically cannot progress without quitting back to the menu could be a deal breaker to some people, and I can't blame anyone for that. Well, of course I can blame Devolver Digital for, you know, overlooking this. That's the people to blame. What I mean is I can't blame anyone for deciding not to play a game because of that. Not when there are so many games that just don't have that problem. I'd still say that overall, from a gameplay perspective, the Plucky Squire is a truly wonderful piece of art, a wonderful piece of entertainment. It's outwardly simple, but there is more complexity going on under the surface. It's always trying different ideas, but it also doesn't overuse any of its mechanics. Of course though, the Plucky Squire isn't amazing because of gameplay alone. Oh no no no, the story still has a role to play before the curtain drops. So let's now turn the page onto the story section and have a gander at the narrative. The The Plucky Squire follows the story of Jot, an adventurer and writer living in the land of Mojo, which exists contained entirely within a storybook, and he's something of a local celebrity to its people. Not only is he the hero of the land, who frequently does battle with Humgrumph, the evil wizard whose name delights me to no end, but once he's done kicking some geriatric dude's ass, he transcribes his adventures into books and distributes them to the people, thus ensuring the cycle of propaganda that keeps him atop the pecking order is never disturbed. I kid, really, the game is way less dark and cynical than I am. If I had written something like this, then Jot would end up as a legitimate pariah by the end of the story, accosted from his place in society when the people wise up to his tricks. He'd then die alone in a gutter somewhere. You know, the sort of thing a psychopath would write. Luckily for our plucky friend here, non-insane people were responsible for this tale, so he escapes a grimdark retribution. For now. That's not to say that there aren't any complex themes to be found here, and later on the script gets really flipped, but generally it's a light-hearted adventure through and through. I do sincerely appreciate how upbeat the story is, even when dealing with difficult concepts like death of a relative or realising the world you're born into despite your best effort is stacked against you, but also on how you have to make the change to your life that you want to see, rather than just expecting the world to give you accolades because you really want them to. Sadly, none of that's really relevant to our main character, Jot, who is a silent protagonist. I say silent protagonist, there are a couple of moments in the game where he technically has dialogue with characters, but throughout the majority of the adventure his friends do most of the talking. They also get most of the characterization. He does feel very basic as far as protagonists go, because whilst he has some visual personality, I like how his hat has a little writing quill in it because he's a writer. Also, his sword is a pen, which is a fantastic little detail. Outside of being the stock hero of the land, he doesn't really have a whole lot going on upstairs. I suppose given the history of writers being socially inept weirdos, I actually kind of buy the idea that the main character of the game, who is a writer, isn't the most social of butterflies. He tends to stand awkwardly in the middle of a room whilst people around him who don't need to write 3 different drafts of a text message to respond to a meme take the lead on conversation, and I can appreciate the representation if nothing else. I suppose if they had done something with his silence, like maybe made it a plot point or deconstructed it in some way, then the cliche would have been invoked for a greater cause, but as it stands, it's just kind of there. I guess, though, we don't really need Jot to talk, because after all, what would he say that his actions don't already spell out? He's a hero, he's quick to leap into danger, good at solving puzzles, generally quite resourceful, and able to take most things on the chin, especially world-shaking proclamations. He's also more than happy to try the diplomatic route because deep down he's not here to make enemies, though his core approach being combat shows that he's kind of used to the idea that you can't diplomacy your way out of every situation. Still, it feels weird that our protagonist Jot has had any real ability to speak stripped away and thus has to rely on his friends to do the talking. I know more about our party members as people than I do about Jot. If this was intentional, like say this was a game about a character who couldn't speak, then I'd absolutely give it a pass, but because that's not what's been established here, I'm left with the opinion that Violet or Thrash have more claim to main character status in this story than the guy the story is about. I've given plenty of games a pass for this before, but generally those are games where the identity of the main hero is actually not important at all, as the only thing that sets them apart from the others who came before them is that they're still here trying. By the way, that's not to say that I wouldn't like an actual character in their place, but I think it's perfectly acceptable as an approach in certain circumstances. And I'll even accept RPGs like Fallout New Vegas or The Outer Worlds having characters speak but not actually be voiced, because hey, those games are all about you choosing what kind of character you're playing as. But when it comes to a game with an actual character as the protagonist, I do feel like this approach has outstayed its welcome. Luckily, Jot's mutism is the only real flaw, narratively speaking, to dwell on, so let's move on to the nice things I have to say. Throughout the game, the story is being narrated by someone who is giving it their all 100% of the time.
Jot could hear the big butt through the entranceway. He readied his bow. It was time to finish this, once and for all. After a bracing trek across the wilds of Mojo, Jot and Thrash arrived at Trod Mountain. The giant machine fell. And exploded on the ground below.
It's like how Michael Caine acted when he was in The Muppets Christmas Carol, in that the role was taken so utterly seriously and given the exact energy it requires, despite the setup of it being an old man surrounded by sock puppets. The narrator of the Plucky Squire is clear, succinct, eloquent, and they have a voice just brimming with charisma. They're absolutely perfect for this role. They start by setting up the basics. We're told that Jot is a hero, he's a writer, he defeats Humgrumph, and the world loves him. That's the cycle of events, that's the way the world works. He is the good guy, and helping others is a core part of who he is. Our first quest is to help Jot's friend and mentor, the wizard Moonbeard, who is amazing by the way, acquire some beeswax for his records. It's not a big quest, but it's important to Moonbeard and therefore important to Jot. That's a nice subtle bit of characterization. If nothing else, Jot is permanently painted as this guy who will help others regardless of how big or small the request is. Anyway, then Humgrumph, being the big bad guy, starts doing generic evil things with generic evil lightning. But wait, something's amiss. As Moonbeard will explain to us, this magic that's being used is not part of the original story, so suddenly the whole narrative takes a right turn down Meta Avenue where it runs over 12 copies of Ricks and Mortys all jerking each other off. Fuck, why did I have to put that image in my head? Although given Dan Harmon's love of incest, it's kind of a possibility that could be a future episode. Anyway, the story is very self-aware. It breaks the fourth wall so often that rebuilding it is about to bankrupt Denmark. Why Denmark? And overall it's about as subtle as a 50 caliber bullet to the urethra. Generally speaking, I don't really like this particular trope, not because it's a bad trope in and of itself, but more because in recent years it's been done to death, and in many cases by people who neither have the talent or patience to pull it off effectively. Just winking at the camera and going, "Hey viewer, I'm talking to you, whoa," is the meta equivalent of farting in a stand-up routine. I won't say it never gets a laugh, but if that's the only thing I remember about the entire evening, then you probably just weren't very good at your job. The odd bit of meta comedy isn't unwelcome, it's just the practice lacks the sting that it used to have through overexposure. The Plucky Squire makes it work though, because it's a fundamental part of the plot. It's not just a gimmick, it's not just the occasional wave to camera, the game fundamentally doesn't work without it. Through meta magic, Jot can move between the worlds of the page and the world. That was a great sentence structure, me, I'm really killing it today. Towards the end of the story, and I'll be honest, I called this plot twist as soon as meta magic was introduced, but just in case the tale of the Plucky Squire is one that you don't want spooled, that's supposed to be spoiled, I did not proofread this at all. Then skip to this time, okay? Cool. The final act of the game is spent with Humgrumph in control of the book, having rewritten the entire story to make himself the hero and Jot the malcontent who messes everything up. The narrator seems not to have noticed this change, and now the friendly and upbeat voice who supported us previously is cruel and twisted and seems to genuinely wish for our downfall.
One such disloyal subject was the wretched Squire Jot, who found himself now imprisoned in a cell in the depths of deep doom, which was exactly where he belonged.
It's like the narrator is a deity unto itself that isn't really for or against anyone in particular, they're just here for the story regardless of who is the hero. This is the kind of meta stuff that I can really dig, it works so well in this particular narrative. Jot now plays the role of the villain, not because he's a bad guy or anything, but because his goal of freeing the people happens to run counter to Humgrumph's totalitarianism and Humgrumph is now in control. It is such a shame that we don't get to sit with how the change actually affects Jot's mental state because once again he's just kind of there, and another character has more claim to center stage than he does. That's right, we're going to talk about Humgrumph now. Humgrumph himself is motivated by the fact that he's a failed poet. He is jealous of everyone else in this very artistic homeland who are all better at him creatively, but he's not about to improve himself. Heavens no, for you see, he's the kind of person who posts the very first creative thing he ever made, then expected it to be beloved just because he made it, and then, when people didn't weep in adoration, he blamed them for just not getting his vision, guys. Jot by comparison writes what he knows, he uses the stories of his life, and the fact that he's successful suggests that he's probably gotten pretty good at it by now. Something that generally doesn't happen unless you come to terms with the ways that you need to grow as a creator. All the while Humgrumph throws a fit because his shitty poem about a butterfly wasn't an instant classic. You actually get to see his poem later in the game, and I'm just gonna tell you this, I think it's tied with Vogon poetry as the third worst in the entire galaxy, and at least the Vogons write the stuff intentionally to torture people. The story itself isn't overly deep or complicated, it largely boils down to two basic messages, them being, try to be the good guy even when it's hard, and the ever important, learn to take criticism, you fucking loser. But I think it all evolves well as it goes. It gives the characters stuff to do based on their skills. It helps them confront their own insecurities and makes them grow as people and become more active towards the end of the game. Initially, your party members don't join you in combat, but after they've solved their personal hang-ups, they actually start fighting alongside you. They feel more confident now and like they can take on the world. Jot's problem as a protagonist is that he's basically at the end of his arc. He's already made it, he's already peaked. He is just not a great lead, but in all honesty, the rest of the story, its characters and themes and fourth wall fuckery are all so strong that I feel they effectively compensate for this. We might have joined Jot too late in the game to see him grow at all, but we're just in time for Violet and Thrash to become the adorable little badasses they never knew they could be. And maybe that's the point of the story. Maybe the Plucky Squire is a game about the influence we have on the world around us, how through determination determination and kindness, we can drive those we care about to be the version of themselves that their own insecurities held them back from being for all this time. And you know what? That's actually a really nice message for a story to have, one of friendship and community. The story is well written, it's well paced, it's accessible without completely avoiding more complicated subject matters and themes, and it's also really bloody funny. There are so many examples throughout the entire game of dialogue that made me laugh, of descriptors that made me chuckle and smile, of character interactions that are so adorable and charming that all the issues I have with the game seem to melt away. I am very happy with what we have here. It's a great story that really ties the whole game together. There might be some issues here and there, but at the end of the day, I'm left with an overwhelming feeling of positivity, which is something I feel so rarely that I genuinely mistook it for some sort of grave medical emergency. The Plucky Squire is a fantastic game. Everything about it, from the moment-to-moment satisfaction provided by victory in combat to the puzzle solving, the way it repeatedly shakes everything up and does its best to walk that fine line between being unpredictable without the choices it makes being so utterly nonsensical. I found the game really rewarding as well. It was always encouraging me to keep going, and it even has collectibles for those with an explorative bone like myself. They mostly come in the form of these amazing art scrolls which show you concept art and various stages of the game's development and character ideas. It's fantastic. It's the exact sort of thing that Little Nightmares 3 was missing. It had a reason for you to actually find the extras. The other collectible, the glitch birds, are adorable, and finding them gives you a pleasant message and some humorous details about their little lives. This is great. It's exactly what I wanted, a reason to seek out collectibles. The rewards themselves might be fairly small things, but I've said before and I'll say again, you should never underestimate the impact of the little things. This game is just such a good vibe. It's fantastic, with only a few blemishes here and there that certainly don't make me consider putting the game down. I loved following Jot's story. I love the characters, I love the world, I love the gameplay, I love everything about this thing. Sure, there's a couple of things that it could improve on, and yeah, the bug early on ain't great, but at the end of the day, the Plucky Squire is still a fantastic, wonderful little game, and I really think people should check it out if they haven't already. What a fantastic way to end the year. I hope you enjoyed this video, my loves. I certainly had a lot of fun making it. It's always more entertaining to make videos about stuff that I feel really good about. I won't say there's no fun nor value to be had in disliking things. Sometimes I can really enjoy giving a game I don't like a well-deserved wedgie, but I'm definitely at the stage of life now where I prefer to like stuff. It's just a better use of my time. With all that said and done, we can leave it here. Thank you so much for being here once again. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a lovely holiday period, if of course you celebrate something, and hey, even if you don't, I still hope you have a lovely winter and end of year time. Be safe, my dears. I love you all so much, and we will see you in the new year.